What if the most famous murder trial in American history wasn't just flawed? What if the truth was buried on purpose? You know the story, or at least you think you do. A football legend, a brutal double murder, a slow-motion Bronco chase watched by 95 million people. The glove didn't fit, the jury acquitted, and the world moved on. But behind the cameras, and buried in files no one wanted to open again, there were witnesses that never came, evidence that was never tested, bloody fingerprints, missing knives, secret confessions, and maybe the scariest part, some of it wasn't hidden by accident. Because now, 30 years later, a new documentary has pulled back the curtain on the O.J. Simpson case. And what it reveals changes everything. This isn't just about one murder. It's about what happens when money, fame, and power collide with justice and win. Let's start from the top, because the story you thought was never the real story at all. So what really happened? Because here's the uncomfortable truth that most people don't know or don't talk about. The moment O.J. Simpson stepped out of that white Bronco, he was never going to prison. Not because he was innocent, but because he was O.J. Simpson. If you're finding this story important, please like and subscribe. It helps us reach more people and make sure these stories are heard. My name is Chris, and thanks for being here. Let's go back to the story. To the public, he wasn't a man suspected of double homicide. He was an icon, a football god, a movie star, a symbol of success, the kind of man who'd broken racial barriers, crossed over into mainstream white America, and smiled his way through it all. Everyone knew him, everyone liked him. But behind that perfect image was something no one wanted to confront. Rage, control, abuse. Nicole Brown Simpson knew it. Her friends knew it. The police had been called multiple times. Photos showed her bruises. There were 911 calls where you could hear her crying. But she was married to him, and no one wanted to make him angry. So when she was found dead, stabbed so viciously it looked like a scene out of a horror movie, the LAPD tiptoed. Carefully, strategically, they were dealing with royalty. This wasn't just a crime, it was a crisis management campaign. And when the trial started, that caution became something else entirely. They lost control of the courtroom. The defense team turned the case into theater. The prosecution stumbled through technicalities. The evidence, some of it stunning, was never even introduced. And the jury, sequestered for months, overwhelmed by media storm and distracted by arguments that had nothing to do with the murders. It was a circus. But here's where the shift really happens. Because now, 30 years later, new evidence is coming out. A bloody fingerprint that was never tested, blood smeared on the light switch, a pair of freshly washed clothes in Nicole's laundry machine, an empty knife box found under the sink. None of that was presented to the jury. And what about the witnesses? There was a woman, Jill Shively, who saw a white Ford Bronco running a red light just blocks from the crime scene. She recognized O.J.'s voice yelling from the driver's seat. But she sold her story to a tabloid, so the prosecution dropped her. Then there was Skip Junis, a man who claimed he saw Simpson at LAX the night of the murders, throwing something into a trash bin near the terminal. Something long, something shiny, he told authorities. No one followed up. There was blood in the car, blood on the glove, blood in the house. And yet, somehow, the system didn't just drop the ball. They kicked it into the ocean. And when the trial was over, when the camera stopped rolling, Simpson walked free. But he didn't walk quietly. Because behind closed doors, he allegedly confessed to his own agent, a man named Mike Gilbert, who says O.J. looked him in the eye and said, "Let me tell you something. I did it, but they can't touch me now." The docuseries doesn't stop there. It uncovers how the murder weapon was likely disposed of at the airport, right before Simpson boarded his flight to Chicago. It details how domestic abuse evidence was buried. It shows just how many people failed Nicole, failed Ron, failed justice. This case wasn't just about a murder. It was about a system built to protect the powerful and erase the victims who get in the way. Let's stop for a second, because in all the headlines, the chase, the celebrity hype, there were two people who never got to speak: Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. Let's start with Nicole. She was more than a victim. She was a mother, a daughter, a woman who tried to survive in a relationship with someone the world worshipped, but who, behind closed doors, made her feel like she was nothing. In the years before her murder, Nicole called 911 dozens of times. Once, while hiding in the bushes outside her own house, she whispered into the phone, "He's going to kill me. He's O.J. Simpson. You know his record." The police came. They saw the bruises, the cracked lip, the fear in her face. And then they left, because it was O.J. Nicole wrote letters, painful, private letters about being hit, about feeling trapped. She told friends, "He gets this look in his eyes. It's like he wants to kill me." One night, he broke down the door to her bedroom. Another night, she was photographed with a black eye. She tried to leave him. She took the kids and moved out. She even got a restraining order, but it didn't stop. Her family begged her to stay away, and for a while, she did. But when you share children with your abuser, there's always a reason to see them again. A handoff, a dinner, a birthday, an apology. And that's what makes June 12, 1994 so haunting. Because Nicole wasn't supposed to die that night. She was just at home with the lights on in Brentwood, an expensive, safe neighborhood. Ron Goldman, he wasn't part of any drama. He was a 25-year-old waiter who came by to return Nicole's mother's glasses. He wasn't even inside the house when he was killed. The scene was so brutal. Nicole had defensive wounds all over her body. She was stabbed multiple times in the head and neck. Her throat was slit so deeply, it nearly decapitated her. Ron had stab wounds across his hands, his arms, his chest. He fought back, but there was no surviving it. And yet, in the circus that followed, Nicole and Ron became side characters in their own murder. The spotlight turned to O.J., his lawyers, the chase, the gloves, the jury. Nicole's past was picked apart in the media. Ron was portrayed like he was some random guy in the wrong place at the wrong time. But their stories weren't over, because even as the trial moved forward, people who cared about them refused to stay quiet. One of those people was Jill Shively, a woman who claimed she saw the O.J. speeding away from the crime scene, running a red light in his white Bronco. She called the police. She wanted to testify, but because she sold her story to a tabloid, the prosecution dropped her as a witness. Another was Kip Junis, a worker at LAX, who said he saw O.J. pull up to the airport and throw something away. Something that looked like a bag. He didn't know what it was, but now, years later, he's convinced that bag was held was murder weapon. He didn't know what that was, but now, years later, he's convinced that that bag held the murder weapon. But he wasn't called to testify either. Prosecutors said he wasn't reliable enough. There was also Ron Shipp, a longtime friend of O.J.'s. He was one of the few black witnesses who testified against Simpson. He said that O.J. had to come to him after Nicole's death and said, "I've had dreams of killing her. I'm afraid of myself." And finally, there's Mike Gilbert, Simpson's former agent. He spent years defending O.J., believing in him, until one night, long after the trial, O.J. had said something that changed everything. If she hadn't opened the door with a knife in her hand, she'd still be alive. Gilbert says he knew, in that moment, that was the closest thing to a confession he'd ever get. But people tried to tell the truth, but truth doesn't always win. And here's the real tragedy. After the verdict, O.J. celebrated. He was smiling, laughing. He said he'd go find the real killer, but he never did. Instead, he played golf, wrote a book called If I Did It. He signed autographs. He lived like a celebrity. This is about how easily victims get erased when a bigger name walks into the room. And Nicole Brown Simpson, she saw it coming. She told people, she begged for help, but no one listened until it was too late. When the trial ended in 1995, the world moved on, or at least pretended to. The media packed up, the courtroom empty. O.J. Simpson walked out a free man, smiling. But the people left behind, they never walked free from what happened. Let's start with the families. Fred Goldman, Ron Goldman's father, has spent every single year since the murder trying to get justice for his son. In 1997, he won a civil suit against O.J. for wrongful death. The jury awarded the Goldman and Brown families $33.5 million in damages. Fred Goldman became an activist. He became a face of the victims left behind. Every time O.J. popped up in the news, Fred was there, calm, measured, but furious, still trying to remind people that was lost. And he's still doing it. In 2025, after the Netflix docuseries dropped, Fred issued a public statement. This isn't about reopening the trial, it's about the truth. It's about making sure people don't forget what really happened, because if they do, this could happen again. The Brown family went quieter. Nicole's sister, Denise, occasionally appeared in interviews, but most of them stayed out of the spotlight, trying to protect Nicole's children, Sydney and Justin, who were just 8 and 5 years old when their mother was murdered. They were asleep inside the house when it happened. They're adults now, and they've lived their lives with a shadow no child deserves. As for OJ, he did what he always did, performed, he golfed, he became bizarre. In 2006, he signed a book deal for If I Did It, a hypothetical account of how the murders might have happened if he were guilty. The backlash was immediate. The publisher dropped it. The Goldmans ended up winning the rights in court and released it themselves with If shrunk so small it barely registered on the cover. 2 years later, OJ was back in court, this time for a robbery in Las Vegas. He and a group of men barged into a hotel room to steal back sports memorabilia he claimed was his. Guns were involved. He was arrested, tried, and sentenced to 33 years in prison. He served 9 years, then was released on parole in 2017. In the end, this was never just a trial. It was a warning about celebrity power, about media distraction, about the cracks in our institutions that let people walk free while others are buried and forgotten. Nicole Brown Simpson, Ron Goldman, they weren't just names in headline. They were people. And for the first time in a long time, thanks to the people who never stopped fighting, people are finally seeing them again. On this next case, we uncovered something truly disturbing. Click to watch now.